50 years ago, the race to the moon was a defining feature of the Cold War. Really about planting a flag, wasn't it? A stark symbol of, ideological dominance.
Exactly. Pure symbolism in many ways.
But fast forward to today, and the space race, well, it feels completely different. It's no longer just about flags. It seems like a strategic battleground now.
That's right, for controlling vital resources, cutting-edge technologies, and those critical strategic heights that are really going to define this century.
So our deep dive today is all about exploring that. We're looking into India's ascent in this new space age. We want to understand if India is ready to meet this challenge, if it can truly claim its place among the stars.
And our sources for this are some really insightful excerpts from India's ascent in the new space age. Gives us a focused look.
It does. But maybe before we dive into India specifically, we should unpack this first. What exactly makes this new space age so profoundly different from the one we grew up hearing about?
Well, I think the biggest shift is how space has moved beyond just being a purely scientific thing. It's not just exploration for exploration's sake anymore.
Right.
We've entered an era where it's become, frankly, an undeniable economic powerhouse. It's a critical military frontier. And it's still a powerful symbol of national pride, maybe even more so.
And it's not just the U.S. and Russia anymore, is it?
No, not at all. Unlike the Cold War's two-sided race, this one is profoundly multipolar. You've got the established leaders, the U.S., China, Russia, still very much in the game.
But then there are others jumping in.
Exactly. A whole host of other nations are rapidly gaining ground. They're not just participating. Some are actively challenging the existing dominance. It's a far more crowded and competitive field today.
So, okay, it's crowded, it's complex.
Mm-hmm.
But why does space matter so much right now? What's the immediate relevance?
If you think about it, so much of our modern world is already reliant on space. It underpins global connectivity, think satellite internet, GPS, and your phone.
Sure, everyday stuff.
Everyday stuff, yeah. But also critical things like climate forecasting, disaster management. But the stakes, they go way beyond that now.
You mean economically?
Economically, absolutely. We're talking serious discussions, serious investment around things like asteroid mining, maybe lunar bases down the line, and certainly the commercialization of low Earth orbit. That's happening right now.
And the security angle.
Critically, yes. Space has really evolved into a central arena for national security. There's a clear consensus emerging. Nations that control space, or at least have significant capabilities in space, will increasingly exert influence back here on Earth.
Okay, so given this new landscape, who are the main players we should be watching? You mentioned the U.S., China, Russia.
Right. The U.S. is still, setting a lot of the standards, especially with the private sector playing such a huge role now, like SpaceX working alongside NASA.
And China.
China is expanding its infrastructure aggressively. I mean, the pace is just remarkable.
Yeah.
And Russia leans heavily on its deep heritage, its long experience as a space power.
But it's not just them. You mentioned new entrants.
Yeah, definitely. Look at the United Arab Emirates or Israel. They're making some remarkably ambitious moves for relatively newer players.
And then there's India.
And then there's India. What's really interesting, I think, about India's position is the sheer speed and, maybe more importantly, the ingenuity with which it's rising.
Right.
ISRO, their space agency, isn't just, putting satellites up there. They're fundamentally reshaping how people think about cost efficiency, technical capability, and, frankly, ambition in space.
That's the part I find absolutely fascinating. ISRO's journey, starting from, pretty humble beginning.
Very humble, yes.
To becoming one of the most cost-efficient and crucially trusted space agencies globally. How did they pull that off? What's the secret sauce there?
Well, it seems to be a combination of really smart innovation and a certain resourcefulness. Take their workhorse rocket, the PSLV, the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. It's become this global go-to launch vehicle. It has a remarkable success rate, over 90%, which makes it incredibly reliable. And the key part, it's affordable for launching satellites, both their own and for international customers.
And then there was Gaganyaan, the Mars mission.
Gaganyaan, yes. Who could forget that? Reaching Mars on what was objectively a shoestring budget. I mean, a fraction of what other major missions cost.
Incredible.
It really was. And it wasn't just about saving money, right? It showcased exceptional engineering, brilliant problem solving within some pretty significant constraints, real ingenuity.
And they're clearly not stopping there. Their plans sound even more ambitious now.
Oh, absolutely. We're looking at Gaganyaan, which is India's own human spaceflight program. That's a huge step. Plus new lunar landings, probes heading towards Venus.
So it really feels like ISRO is doing more than just participating. They're actively kind of changing the rules of the game.
I think that's fair to say. They're redefining the parameters, especially around making space more accessible, more affordable, not just for India, but potentially for other nations too.
Which brings us to another interesting angle, space diplomacy.
Exactly. India is very cleverly using its space capabilities as a tool, a powerful instrument of soft power, and also for building strategic alliances. It's become a really effective part of their foreign policy toolkit.
I'm curious about the specifics there, because you see India working with very different groups. They cooperate within BRICS. It's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. But they also cooperate closely with the Quad countries, the US, Japan, Australia. Those seem like quite different strategic alignments. How does that work? Is it a deliberate strategy?
Oh, it's absolutely a deliberate strategy. And you're right, the cooperation looks different. Within BRICS, it often focuses more on, say, shared data from remote sensing satellites, maybe disaster relief coordination, things that have broad developmental benefits, practical, mutually beneficial stuff. With the Quad partners, the emphasis tends to shift more towards shared security interests, domain awareness, particularly in the Indo-Pacific. So you might see more data sharing for maritime surveillance or cooperation on climate resilience, things that align with the Quad's broader goals.
So they tailor the approach depending on the partner and the goal.
Precisely. The strategy is to use these space partnerships to achieve specific geopolitical objectives, whether that's fostering South-South cooperation via BRICS or strengthening security frameworks with the Quad. It's about making space a new, very versatile venue for diplomacy and really boosting their global standing. It goes way beyond just launching rockets.
That collaboration aspect is fascinating, especially when you contrast it with the other side of the coin, the growing threats in space. While the diplomacy is key, the sheer speed of technological change driving this new race is, well, it's kind of staggering. What are the big innovations we're seeing?
The innovation is relentless, honestly. We're seeing really radical shifts in things like propulsion, moving beyond the chemical rockets we're used to towards technologies like electric and plasma propulsion.
Let me put it better for.
Much more efficient for long-haul deep space travel. But maybe the thing having the biggest impact right now is the rise of reusable launch platforms.
Like SpaceX?
Exactly like SpaceX. They really prove the concept. By making the launch vehicles recoverable and reusable, you dramatically lower the cost of getting to orbit. And you can launch much more frequently. It's completely lowering the barrier to entry for all sorts of space activities.
But that increased activity, that easier access, it must come with downsides, right? It feels like we're opening up space, but maybe making it more dangerous at the same time.
You've hit on a critical point.
Yes.
The growing problem of space debris, for example, is becoming a huge concern. A ticking time bomb, some call it.
All the junk floating around.
Exactly. Every old satellite, every discarded rocket stage, even tiny fragments. They become potential projectiles traveling at incredible speeds. They pose a real threat to active satellites, to the space station, to future missions.
And then there's the weaponization aspect.
And then there's the escalating threat of ASATs, anti-satellite weapons. This is a major worry. These can range from, kinetic kill vehicles, missiles designed to physically smash satellites.
Creating even more debris.
Creating potentially huge amounts of more debris, exactly. But also less obvious things like electronic warfare to jam signals or cyber attacks to disable or even hijack critical space infrastructure without any physical destruction. These capabilities are fundamentally turning space into, the next potential battlefield.
That is a stark shift. Thinking of space as this neutral, peaceful place for science. That idea seems almost quaint now.
It does, unfortunately. And you see the practical consequence of this. Nations like the US, Russia, China, they've established dedicated space command units within their militaries.
Right, Space Force in the US.
Exactly. That development alone has fundamentally changed the whole conversation around space. It's moved decisively from being just about science to being an undeniable strategic high ground.
So what are the specific military worries?
Well, imagine a conflict where one side targets the other's communication satellites or their GPS constellation. The impact on the ground would be immediate and devastating, affecting everything from your phone's navigation to complex military operations, banking, power grids. So much relies on space now.
Wow.
So anti-satellite weapons, advanced space-based surveillance, keeping an eye on adversaries, and that ever-present threat of cyber attacks. It all contributes to space becoming this deeply contested domain.
Which really forces a question, doesn't it? Both for India and maybe for you listening.
Absolutely. Will India feel compelled to develop its own robust space force, its own offensive and defensive capabilities in space? How will it secure its national interests beyond Earth in this increasingly militarized cosmos?
Yeah.
It's a huge question.
And it's not just a military or strategic question anymore. It's rapidly becoming an economic one, too. Because space, as we're kind of unpacking here, is way more than just glory or defense. It's turning into a really powerful economic engine.
Oh, massively so. The projections are staggering. Some estimate the global space market could easily cross $1 trillion by 2040. $1 trillion.
And how does that translate down to, say, India specifically? What are the tangible economic benefits there?
Well, think about very practical, down-to-earth applications. Precision agriculture, for instance. Using satellite data to help farmers optimize crop yields, manage water resources more efficiently, that's huge for India.
Okay, that makes sense.
Or think about satellite broadband, bringing reliable internet connectivity to remote villages, areas that fiber optics might never reach, bridging that digital divide. And even things like advanced telemedicine, using satellite links to connect specialists with patients in underserved rural areas. These are real-world economic and social benefits impacting millions.
So ISRO's work isn't just about national prestige then, it's acting as a catalyst for the economy.
Absolutely. By providing that reliable, affordable access to space, they're essentially enabling a whole ecosystem. Countless entrepreneurs, innovative startups, entirely new industries are popping up in India, focused on space applications and services. It's having this massive multiplier effect on their domestic economy.
Which brings us right back to where we started, really. The big question hanging over all this. Will India truly rise to dominate this new space race? What does the roadmap look like for them?
Well, if leadership is the goal, the roadmap involves several critical elements, I think.
Like technology?
Definitely. Continued, perhaps even increased, investment in advanced spacecraft technologies. We're talking next-generation reusable launchers to compete with the likes of SpaceX, maybe even looking further ahead to things like deep space habitat.
Yeah, diplomacy.
Strengthening those international partnerships we talked about will be absolutely crucial. No nation can really do it all alone in space anymore. And alongside that, developing a really sophisticated, adaptive national space policy, one that strongly encourages and fosters space commerce, that private sector growth.
They certainly have some advantages going for them.
They absolutely do.
Yeah.
ISRO has that exceptional pool of talent, a proven track record of, frankly, audacious innovation, and that incredible ingenuity we discussed. They know how to do complex things efficiently.
But what's missing, or what's needed most now?
For true leadership in this really competitive new era, I'd say it probably boils down to audacious political will, sustained and substantial long-term investment. This isn't cheap. And a really clear, ambitious vision that stretches decades into the future.
So if they can bring all that together...
If they can bring all that together, then yes, India doesn't just have to be a participant in this new space race. It absolutely has the potential to lead it.
So wrapping this up, it feels like the key takeaway is that this new space race is about so much more than just, cool rockets or planting flags.
Definitely. It's fundamentally about shaping the future, isn't it? The economic contours, the military balance, maybe even the cultural outlook of the 21st century. It's all intertwined with what happens in space.
And for a nation like India, with its incredibly rich heritage of scientific thought, its mathematical prowess, and its rapidly growing global influence, this feels like a really pivotal moment.
It really does. A moment to not just participate, but to truly claim its rightful place among the leading powers shaping that future.
The stars are within reach, as they say, and it feels like the countdown has definitely begun for India.
Which leaves us with a thought, perhaps for you listening. What future do you imagine for India in the cosmos?